Made possible by the Carnegie Council, the voice for ethics in international affairs.
Welcome to the Carnegie Council. Today our speaker is Tomas Sedlacek, and he will be discussing his book, The Economics of Good and Evil.
Economics is innately laden with morality and value judgments, according to economist Tomas Sedlacek. Stay tuned, and he'll explain why that matters in light of the global financial crisis.
Does the system behave the way we like it to behave? And the answer to this question is no. It produces results that we are unhappy with. Some of them, not all, but it does. If you actually go down Amazon or any other bestseller list, I challenge you to do this. It's a wonderful exercise. Bestsellers in economics, what will you find? 99% of these books are books extremely critical of capitalism. You will hear words irrationality, myth, crisis, collapse, evil, etc., etc. There is not a single book that actually goes on praising the advantages of this beautiful system called capitalism. So does the system behave the way we want it to behave is ultimately a moral question, one that we are banned to ask. Because economics is supposed to be a positive science, not a normative science. The difference is clear. Positive statement should describe things as they are. Facts only, baby. Whereas a normative statement describes the things the way we want them to be. Let's take Milton Friedman, who was, of course, the biggest proponent of this positive economics. He wrote this famous essay, Economics as a Positive Science. In that essay, on the first page, you will find the following sentence. Economics should be a positive science. Now, please tell me if that is a positive or normative statement. So you can't even say it without being normative, because obviously if economics was a positive science, then that sentence would be redundant, and all he's saying is I, Milton Friedman, would like it to be different than what it is, and I would like it to be value-free. And by the way, value-free is a huge value. One we economists happen to believe in very much. So even linguistically, it is impossible to have social science as a positive science. Now let's take a leap and try and connect economics with pop culture, and let's take a look at horror movies. Now, what happens if you separate the soul from the body? We each have a soul that has a body, or a body that has a soul, any way you like to look at it, and we are together. The soul gives it meaning, humanity, and the body is sort of a machine, if we take it. If I simplify this, what happens in horror movies if you divide these two? If you take the body and you rid it of a soul, you get a zombie or any other form of undead. And if you separate the spirit from the body, you get a ghost. So if you disjoin these two, it's not good. The common plot is, I don't know, I have a lover, she becomes a zombie, and she starts attacking me. She's no longer this beautiful, I don't know, Joanna or Jacqueline or whatever she was. She now becomes a mechanistic animal that only wants to eat and reproduce by biting. And spirits haunt us, and the fear we get from spirits is different. Spirits don't attack us in most of the horror movies. They just stare. And they want something of us, and they accuse us. It's as if a superego. And they haunt us or attack us because of some moral misdeed which we did. Now, I argue the same has happened with economics. We've split the body and the soul. Technics from ethics. And what you get is a zombie that attacks, optimizes, maximizes, is mechanic, doesn't have a soul, doesn't have a purpose, and it's doing sort of vegetative functions, which is eating and multiplying, on the one hand. On the other hand, we have ridiculous moral standards that blame us, that condemn us, and that know nothing. And this is what happens when you separate the two. And this is what we've done. We are here feeding a zombie. We are not directing the body as we should. The soul represents kindness, humanity, purpose, aim, meaning, poetry, whatever. And it is not, and this I think is a new thing, it is not well when it is alone. Ethics do not do well when they are alone, nor does philosophy, nor does poetry, nor does anything else. This thing needs to be together. In the beginning, economics was ethics, basically, and nobody tried to separate it. In fact, we had to go through a huge effort to separate it. And it has led to results that are ridiculous. So we are trained, and those of you who studied economics, we are trained not to have things value-laden, and it's impossible to do it. Well, let's take a more specific example. You have an analyst answering a question in TV. What was the inflation in, I don't know, May? And the analyst says, oh, it was 0.4 percentage points. What's the next question? Is that good or is that bad? And often you don't even have to ask the question. The analyst rushes, oh, and the Fed should or shouldn't, and this is good, and this is bad, and blah, 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 blah. So you see it's embedded in the most simple example of our everyday economy. In the beginning, interest rate was extremely moral. A moral issue. You can go down, and all the ancients were extremely critical of usage of interest rates and usury. For reasons that we don't really understand, you can go Aristotle, you can go Old Testament, you can go Holy Quran, you can go New Testament, you can go into Vedas, you can go anywhere you want to. All the ancients said, there's something spooky about it. Avoid it. We don't know exactly why. The best argumentation, logical argumentation against interest rate was done by Aristotle. Still very weak argumentation. Okay, fast forward till today. What have we done? We have made interest rate a cornerstone of our society. Our society is unimaginable without it. In fact, I think we'll go down in history as the dead age. Like we had Iron Age and whatever, Ice Age. We have dead age. There's never been a society as dependent existentially on debt. In America, you graduate, you're indebted already. You very rarely start a business without initial injection of debt. What is the problem of an interest rate? Well, interest rate makes money time travel possible. It's like in Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty. And the teleporting machine is called interest rate. If we didn't have interest rate, money could not travel in time. Let me give an example. If I borrow $10,000, it looks like I'm borrowing it from a bank or from a friend or from, not likely, mother-in-law or father-in-law. But what I'm really doing is I'm just teleporting my future income into present. It doesn't really matter who is the interceptor or the mediator of that. But I am vacuum cleaning my energy, consumer energy, from the future to present. In this, interest rate is similar to alcohol. How? Well, alcohol can also time travel energy over short distances and only one direction. On a Friday evening, when we feel we are jumping up and down the bars and we suddenly can sing and we're very sexy and we talk to girls, in my case, that I would never have the guts to talk to, and what's even more surprising, they talk back. We often think that this extra energy and this jouissance is brought to you by alcohol. No. The only thing alcohol does, it vacuum cleans and teleports your Saturday morning energy into that Friday evening. But the energy of the weekend is constant. Now, it is fine to get drunk on a Friday evening if you have nothing important to do on a Saturday morning. It is not clever to get drunk on a Sunday evening if you have something important on a Monday morning, which a lot of people have. Now, where's the allegory tie into interest rate? This, I think, is one way how to read the crisis. And this is why I think the ancients were so afraid of interest rate, because there, the time travel is over 40 years. And there is no mathematical or any other way how to see the future 40 years ahead. We can, with some reasonable foresight, we know what's going to happen tomorrow morning, and I know if I have a meeting or not. Most of these joke movies are when this collapses. Suddenly, you know, you're drunk and, oh, I have an important meeting to do. So it's funny and laughable. But in fact, there's nothing funny about having a hangover on a Monday morning. So 40 years there, 40 years back, this is one way how to read the crisis. We've landed with zero energy being hangover on a Monday morning where we need this energy. And that's why this is scary. That's the scary part about interest rate, and that's the spooky part of interest rate. Our problem today is not technical. The technicality we've done well. The problem is elsewhere, and this problem that we're in will not be remedied by technicality. It's like you have the zombie without a soul. My argument here, we have to put it back together, because the way we do it is we have this fancy, this is I think the story that we have in our heads. There is the economy, which is value-free, robot, it is God-given, it is unchangeable, it has laws of nature that was always here, and there is nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do about it is bring in the state or NGOs or some sort of charity to cushion it, okay? So that the poor are not as poor, so that the rich are not as rich, and we create artificial pillows around it. But we never touch the very engine of economics. There we believe it's physics. We've built purposely economics, which is a social science, as physics. If you open a textbook of economics, it will look like a physics textbook from a distance. Graphs, simple causalistic equations. No wonder we've created a zombie. It was alive, we are studying human beings, and we use the tools of studying dead objects, because that's what physics studies. It studies dead objects, which is fine as long as it is dead objects that you're concerned with. But not human beings and not organic society. Thank you.
Most people would agree that the fiscal crisis of 2008 was basically due to the irresponsible acts of the banking sector, the financial services sector. And many people thought that as a result of that, there would be a significant movement towards the left. But in fact, since 2008, if there's been any significant political movement, it's been to the right. We've had elections in Britain. We had elections in this country in 2010. It appears that Sarkozy is going to have another term. Angela Merkel and the Christian Democrats seem to be the only realistic government in Germany. And in fact, if there is any political energy, it appears to be coming from the right, not from the left. Yep. And the right, of course, basically does believe in capitalism and is, in fact, if anything, opposed to government intervention. Now, what do you attribute this conservative reaction to the fiscal crisis, for which, in fact, capitalism, as you describe it, was responsible?
Okay, thank you. That's a very good and very difficult question. Let's just first frame that European European extreme right is much more left than American left. Okay? If Angela Merkel came with her radical right-wing reform of healthcare to America, I don't know what you would call her if you were calling Obama communist. I think in this we are both making a mistake. I mean, both the left and the right. There is an agreement on this fundamental issue. Please, let's just look at the common wisdom, which you already see even in the newspapers. What caused the crisis in terms of fiscal policy? Too much consumption, overconsumption, great parties over, blah, blah, blah. We've read this and heard this 10,000 times. What is the solution to the problem that was induced by overconsumption? More consumption. This is what we want. I mean, government, please spend in our stead. The economy is weak. We don't have enough energy to spend. And this is the problem. We have artificial demand. Demand is something that doesn't want to be fulfilled. Demand wants to be multiplied. That is one of the mistakes I think we make. The moment you have something, you're not satisfied, you want more, like a child. And if we don't have enough money, so this is the dictum. This is, again, I think, the story that we have in our heads. It is consumption that is the engine of the economy. So we must consume. If you run out of money, go into debt, but consume. If you run out of debt possibility, then somebody else has to consume in your stead. Okay, the government. So we come to an ironic situation. The government is consuming so that the economy is functional. And here I think so that's my second remark. My third remark is I don't think this is a crisis of capitalism, by the way. Capitalism had its problems, it has its problems, and it will have its problems, like any other system we've ever constructed or ever will construct, like communism, like feudalism, like mercantilism, anything. Everything has glitches. What I think we are in a crisis of is growth capitalism. And there's a huge difference, and nobody's really called it, named it. So here I propose a label. This is not capitalism in what we believe in. It is growth capitalism. And this is where we are religiously disappointed that the God of growth left us. And what do we have to sacrifice? Okay, let's sacrifice, I don't know, government cuts, or let's sacrifice whatever, austerity measures. It is growth capitalism, the fervent belief that it must grow at all costs. That's in crisis. It grew for so long. It grew, and it was beautiful, and nobody complained for a generation. 1 year, minus 3%. How could that be? Gods must hate us. What do we do? So it's growth capitalism, and that crisis is correct, and it should be there, because how can we only, and this I'm quoting, of course, the book of Job, how can we only take the good things from the Lord? In other words, today, the market. Our God, impersonal God. And this is another thing, going back to the beginning of ethics. We feel that markets are moral value-free. In fact, the opposite is the truth. They dictate values. They say water is more expensive or less expensive than Coke. Therefore, value of water is less or more depending on the price. Wine is more expensive. So there is this impersonal God called market that dictates values, aka prices. How that God got born is in dispute, but usually the story in economics is that there once upon a time this individuals and free will constructed this God called the market, but the market dictates back. It tells you your value in terms of wage. It tells you the value. And it was too much consumption that led us into this situation. The solution is more consumption. This doesn't work. There is no way we can continue believing that it's consumption that is driving us forward. And it is, by the way, it was artificial level of growth. It was built by debt.
You said that the market drives morality in certain circumstances. You quoted the example of water costing more than Coke. In my country, New Zealand, which is the world's largest trader in milk, there is a common lament that milk costs more than Coke. And people say that's bad, that's immoral. Now, is that a case of the market driving the outcome, that milk costs more than Coke, or is it a moral judgment that is being made externally that milk shouldn't cost more than Coke?
It's both. I come from a country where beer is cheaper than water, so I know what you're talking about. That I think is very moral. But my point here is you can't really separate it. Oscar Wilde said that, and this is a slight paraphrase, economist is a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And this is it. Economists can say almost nothing about value. I can only talk of price. And the only situation price exists is in a situation of a market. I definitely don't think there is a market for this leftover water. So I don't know the price of this water. I need a market to tell me the price. And here we are ready to give our subjective, the way we feel things should be valued, which is your question. And we subject ourselves to the dictate of price. So we often make a mistake that we equate price with value.
You mentioned interest rates. Could you give us your thoughts about interest rates and inflation?
Yeah. So, okay, so let me start with interest rate and morality. This is the way we construct interest rate. Let's imagine I'm a bank and you are Greece or California or whoever. So you come to me, I need $2 billion, and what will I do? I will construct an interest rate based on the probability of what? Of your bankruptcy. This is the underlying archetype of an interest rate is the possibility of default. I construct everything around it. The only thing that I care when I give a loan is the probability that I get it back or not. I don't care about the value, really. Of course, that's a part of it, but really the question is, will I get my money back at certain interest rate? Okay, so let's say that you are Greece, so this is the year 2007. I already have some issues, so I charge you 6% interest rate over 2 years. I do that, we make that deal, and I come to a third party and I insure that investment, and that was called credit default swap. In other words, I have lent money to Greece, I want to insure it, and you say, okay, for 3% or whatever, 2%, I will, in case she defaults, you will not lose your money, I will pay it for you as a sort of an insurance. Fine. All right, good. It all sounds, and we have technical analysis and billions of papers and studies, and we read in the newspapers, oh, the credit default swaps went up by 20 percentage basis points. Okay, but what happens in the situation where this thing called bankruptcy, around which the whole interest rate is calculated, actually materializes? The whole construct breaks down. This is what happened in Greece. This is what happened in any other. This is why I think in the huge picture, economic justice, because we should be fair here. It was my stupidity to lend you money. I should have had all these beautiful mathematical models calculating the probability of you and everybody else not defaulting and blah, 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 blah. I didn't. That was my mistake. Nobody forced me to lend you money. It was my way of making money and my risk. And isn't the very basic principle of capitalism, you should be responsible for the risks that you're taking. So in this macro sphere, I argue we have bankrupted the institution of bankruptcy. The institution of bankruptcy is bankrupt. We no longer allow companies to go bankrupt, Detroit and whatever. So, in other words, how can we pretend to keep lending when we know that bankruptcy around which the whole interest rate is constructed is impossible? That governments will always be bailout. And nobody will trust you anymore. We, in our European Constitution, we had black on white, no bailout. This was black and white. Every country is responsible for its own financings. No bailout. Black on white. How do you think you can convince anyone now that, okay, but next time we're really going to give no gifts to Greece, except on Christmas, holidays, and birthdays, and whenever actually. And Ireland, and Iceland, and Hungary, not to just, zero out on Greece. So it is like an airbag that works wonderfully, always, except a car crash. Because interest rate works fine, it's smooth, you can write papers and you can report on the movements of interest rates and I don't know what, credit default swaps and whatnot. Until there is a car crash, this whole thing, we take a rubber and we eraser and we scratch it out, we forgive. Which is fine, but we have to have obviously different rules for the functioning of the meta than we have for the function of the market.
So if you could close your eyes and dream,
okay.
What would the integrated body and soul of the economy look like, and how do we get there?
Okay, that's an easy question. We need to stop pretending the interest rate is interest rate when it isn't. An example that I just gave. We need to stop pretending that price does not include morality, because every single purchase is a moral decision. If you buy coffee, you're buying more than just coffee. You're buying ideology. Let's go back to the example of beer. We have wonderful beer. It's called Pilsner Urquell. And I had a debate with the CEO of the Czech Pilsner Urquell, and one bottle costs 30 crowns. And I asked him, what's the value of that actual beer in it? And he said 2 crowns. The rest, 28, is everything else but beer. So we must understand, when we are buying beer, we're not really buying beer, we're buying everything around it. The ideology, the research. When you buy yogurt, the actual yogurt in it costs almost nothing. What is expensive is the thing around it, the superstructure that makes you feel that yogurt is what you should buy. This is not natural. This is something that is labored for. And we need to acknowledge this. Price is not value-free. Price is value-free in 6%, and the rest of that is some sort of ideology that we have. To give an example, I think once movies were constructed so as to look like from a real life, I think today we live real lives to look like from a movie. So in other words, if you want to pull out a romantic dinner, you cannot do so without Brad Pitt sitting next to you. Or in you. And you know, I'm going to be Brad Pitt tonight. You can't do, this is impossible to do it without it. You simply have no choice. If you want romantic something, you will probably think of a movie you saw or a book you read or a story. And the whole idea that romance exists is an ideology itself, and that it is important. Because 300 years back, what? Why candles? There's nothing else that shed light. You know, why sunset? Why nice little birds singing in the open? This is normal. So this is a tall order, of course. I'm 34. I promise by the age of 40 I'll come up with an answer. But this is a direction.
Made possible by the Carnegie Council, the voice for ethics in international affairs. For more information, see www.carnegiecouncil.org.